All right, in this demonstration, I want to talk about how you can use block quotes and inline quotes. So go ahead and in your code pen or whatever editor you're using, we're going to do create new pen. And I'm going to pull these down because I'm only doing HTML right now. Give this a title and we'll call it block quotes and inline quotes. Let's go ahead and save it. First of all, a block quote is literally a block of text that you're quoting from another source. People will use block quotes in other ways, sometimes when they're not quoting stuff, but technically when you're doing it semantically, a block quote is technically intended to be a quotation of something else. But some people just use it as a way to set certain kinds of information aside and call it out a little bit, but it's really intended to be a quote. And it's supposed to take up the entire block, right, as a block level element. There are other quotes that are just called, it's the Q tag, it's called a quote, and it is really an inline quote. So it's not intended necessarily to take up the entire block. So I'll show you an example of both of those. First of all, let's go ahead and put a paragraph into something. All right, so that we can see the difference in the way that a paragraph would look between it and something else. Okay. Put some lorem ipsum. I'm just going to paste it. I copied it from another source. And I'm going to scoot this over a little bit since we've got so much text now that we're dealing with. And let's actually go ahead and I'll copy this and I'll put another paragraph, but I will make it shorter. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, so we've got two paragraphs, and let's say that in between those two paragraphs we wanted to quote something, but it's a long set of text, and so we don't want to do it inline. We want to call it out so that it's very clear that if it's like maybe 2 or 3 lines or something, that we can call it out as its own quote. I'm going to go to the original resource, and this is the paragraph that I'm going to grab. But I'm not going to grab all of it. I'm just going to grab a portion of it, and let's just take it that far. All right, so I'm going to copy this. I'll come over here and I'm just going to paste it for a moment. And if you remember, one of the things that I could do if I don't want to actually type block quote tags around there is I can select the entire block, right? And then I can use my shortcut. Mine is going to be Command-Shift-A to do a wrap around, and you should remember this from previous exercises. And I'm going to type the word block quote all as one word. Okay, and by the way, these should not be capitalized. All right, and so now we've got a block quote. And let's go ahead and save it. It's reminding us to save the work. And you'll see over here in the browser window that it, by default, using the default browser styling, it is automatically indenting this set of text. And so that automatically sets it apart for us and it helps us understand what that is. And the other thing too that you need to do, or you should do, you don't have to do it, but you're supposed to do it as a best practice, is that if it is in fact a quote, you want to cite the source. And so the way to do that is to copy this URL. So I'll put that in my clipboard. I'll come back over here, and inside of the block quote opening tag, you're going to put a space after the word block quote, but before the ending of the right angle bracket, and you're going to use the cite attribute. And you see automatically, as soon as I hit that space tab or that space bar, it immediately gives me some code hints that would be appropriate attributes to add inside of this tag. And so cite is the first one that pops up, and that's the one I actually want. So I'll hit enter, and then I'm going to say cite equals, and then in quotation marks, I'm going to type or I'm going to paste in that web address. And so it tells me that that's the citation address for this block quote. So if somebody wanted to visit it, they could. This is what I referred to in the lecture before as an attribute. And I mentioned that every attribute is going to say its attribute name and then equals, and then the value will be in quotation marks and double quotes. And then inside of those double quotes, you would put the value for that attribute. In this case, it's a web address that is for the cite attribute that tells us what we're specifically citing in this block quote. Okay. Now, there might be an instance where you don't want to use all these different lines. So what you can also do is have an inline quote. So if we jump over here, maybe all we want to do is just say reading isn't linear. So I'm going to copy this into my clipboard, and then I'll go over here again, and let's just say that in the first part of our paragraph, we'll just start off by saying, and let's look at the author's name so that you can see. It's Jason Santamaria, who, by the way, is an incredible web typographer. And by the way, this is a great website. It's alistapart.com, and without going into it and spending a lot of time in this demo, this is a really, really wonderful website. You should consider checking it out. Anyway, so it's Jason Santamaria, and I can say something like, as Jason Santamaria says, and then what you would do is you would put the quote, it's a Q tag, right? You would put the Q tag, and I'll put ending Q like that. And inside of here, I will type, inside of the Q marks, I will paste reading isn't linear. And one of the things that you'll notice right off the bat is that it says, as Jason Santamaria says, reading isn't linear. It put quotes around it, and I don't have quotes here. So that tells you something right away, that the default behavior for a browser is to put quotation marks, double quotation marks around something that's inside of a Q tag. And you remember before that I told you the difference between a block quote and a Q tag is that the block quote literally takes up the entire block, right? And a Q tag is inline. It's an inline element. And so you'll see that, as I said before in our lecture, something that's inline can sit side by side on the same line as other text or other elements. And that's exactly what it's doing. And one of the things that we also would want to do is we'd probably want to go ahead and also include this cite attribute. So I'm going to just copy the one that we have down here. So in this Q tag, I'll put a space, and then automatically it tries to give me the cite attribute. I'm just going to hit paste so that I've got my paste there, and it looks kind of weird like this isn't ending, but it's because this is all run together without any spaces in it, which is exactly the way it should be. And so because it doesn't fit on one line, it's trying to force it to fit as best it can. And if we wanted to look at it like this, you'll see that it starts to flow better. But I do have one too many spaces there, and that would be a problem for a lot of browsers. So you need to make sure that you don't put more than one space in between a tag and its attribute, or even if I were to add other attributes after this citation, if I were to come here and hit the space bar and add some other attribute, you want to make sure that there's not more than one space there, but there is at least one space in between. Okay, that is how you do quotes and block quotes. Make sure that you save this, and I'm going to go ahead and be sure to add this to my practice lessons collection and move on to the next.